right. Well, welcome everyone to our excellent 90-minute panel that in a minute I'm going to be introducing our moderator, our lead speaker here. But to start, we do have a very special award video that we would like to play as people are continuing to come in out of the waiting room, and after maybe taking a 15-minute break from trauma-informed coaching or the imagery training that we were just doing. I know hopefully everyone got a snack, got a chance to take a little break, get a stretch, a couple air squats. But while we're getting ready for this next one, let's go ahead and play this next award video.
The Man of the Year is awarded in recognition of outstanding contributions to men's rowing and/or to an outstanding man in rowing. This year's recipient is Arshay Cooper.
Hey everybody, Arshay Cooper here. Happy holidays. Thank you to US Rowing, thank you to the rowing community, and thank you to everyone who believe I deserve this award. It has been an impactful year. We have seen so many people set free through the sport of rowing, and we were able to create a ton of access this year. And there's still so much work to do, so can't wait to see what happens in 2022. Again, Man of the Year, I am honored, but would not have been able to do this without a team. So thank you to all those who have running alongside of me to make sure that we create more magic and success in the sport of rowing. And again, I hope that we all continue to work together to help people fulfill their destiny and their dreams through our sport. I believe it's the best sport in the world, and I think it's our duty to offer this gift to many others. So thank you, and stay warm, and we'll chat soon. Bye.
Well, yeah, snaps all around. Wonderful, very fitting for this session. We have so much to get through. There were so many programs that we wanted to highlight, and so we really want to get to it. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful and very experienced moderator, Richard Butler, who is the co-chair of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And also, I think, did you say you think this is your 10th convention, Richard? Is that what you said? Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to fall back and be here for the chat and the Q&A, but take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Brett. Hey, can I ask my other panelists that are not going to be in the first panel, Liz, to turn off your camera, please? Great, fantastic. So wonderful to be here, hear it from the change makers. I'm so excited. I like to call this session World Changers. And so we're going to hear a lot from nine wonderful panelists who are creating legacy in our sport. I want to first introduce our first panel. On our first panel, we have Arshay Cooper, Man of the Year and a Most Beautiful Thing author, as well as an activist. I also would like to introduce US Rowing's one of US Rowing's newest employees, Will Bott, Executive Director of STEM to Stern, and then Jeff McGinnis, Executive Director of PA Center for Adaptive Sports. We have such limited time. If you have questions or something you want to chat, could you please leave the chat limited to something just directly to the panel? If you're responding to things that are being said, please don't have back and forth conversation because the chat becomes very distractive. We have a Q&A session that you can put your questions and answer them. I cannot promise that I'm going to get to all of those, but I believe that we can always go back later, look at the recording and answer the question if we think it's pertinent to answer your question. So sit back, take a deep breath, and enjoy the action. So panelists, I'm gonna throw out this first question. You are here today because you are a change maker. What changes are you looking to make, actually? What challenge are you looking to solve in rowing to make it more inclusive? And how do you or your organization make this happen? Now, I'm gonna start with you, Jeff.
Well, the word that you hear a lot in our field is inclusion. We're trying to get people with disabilities more involved in rowing, and specifically, and inclusion generally means people with and without disabilities participating together. So the easiest way in the rowing world to understand that is you could have a double with a person with a disability and one without. That's the inclusion model in a nutshell. And in order to do that, you have to reach into the community wherever you are and recruit. You have to recruit people, with disabilities and those without. And what we want to see is more of that happening in community settings and in club settings, because it's not, it looks different from the outside if you don't know about it, but it actually is rowing fundamentally, and it requires a little bit of education and a couple people who are willing to sort of lead the, carry the banner for the club or program, and then you can begin getting people with disabilities out on the river. And U.S. Rowing is a great resource to help that happen.
Thanks, Jeff. Real quick, give me one example, and you can use any of your sports. Give me one example of how exactly you reach into the community to make whatever sport more inclusive.
Well, we're in Philadelphia. We've been around for 35 years, so we have deep roots. So for us, it might be a little different than somebody who's just trying to get started. But we go into rehab centers, or I'll go to the VA hospital if we're trying to recruit veterans, and we'll talk to them, show them video, get them to come to our boathouse. Kind of a go slow approach, because sometimes you're asking people who are wheelchair users to get out of their chair and get in a boat and get on the river. And that is a real fundamental sort of shift in the way they go through the day. So you have to build up confidence and in us that we know what we're doing. And then, that's one way we would do that. But for a new program, it's kind of the same thing. You just have to find out who in your community is, has what you need as far as resources, whether it's people or even funds or equipment. But that's sort of the sketch of how that would work.
All right, thank you for that. All right, Will, I've heard a lot about you for the last 2 years and your programming, and people are really supportive. So the same question, it's just nice to have you on the panel and to meet you face to face. Really cool.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Thanks. And so you also are here because you're a change maker and a world changer. What changes are you looking to make? What challenge are you looking to solve in rowing to make it more inclusive? And how does your organization actually do this?
Yeah, nice to meet you as well, and thanks for having this. So we really focus on access. We've identified.
I'm sorry, Will. You know what? I think it's important for people to know what your program is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So my name is Will Bott, and I'm the director of STEM to Stern. STEM to Stern is a program that was started in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as a way to address some of the major barriers that kids in our community face that kept a lot of our kids out of rowing. And we found that transportation and swimming competency were two of the major barriers that kept so many of our kids in Milwaukee from being able to participate on our team. And so we really focus on access, on breaking some of these barriers down by providing transportation, by providing swimming. And then we've added an educational component to the program, because the education gap in our country was something that we just couldn't ignore. And so we want to see successful student athletes on and off the water. But STEM to Stern as a model is now being run across the country, a bunch of different teams all over the place. And we've really broken it down into focus on access, on being able to address and level the playing field so that kids have rides, so that kids know how to swim, so that kids have some extra educational programming to really support kids and integrate onto a rowing team. So we're not trying to create necessarily new programs or separate programs. We're really focused on bringing kids together and leveling the playing field so that that integration can happen.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. Thank you for that response. One more question. You talked about successful students. What does success actually look like? What does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think success in STEM to Stern. I mean, there are a few things that I would say success looks like. I think the first thing that we look at is integration. I think success is obviously the kids that are participating in STEM to Stern having access to, you know, wonderful rowing clubs and, you know, all the good that rowing clubs can provide, education and whatever. But success also looks like kids who would never have met each other coming down to the boathouse and building relationships with each other. Kids who would never have even known each other now in the same boat, pushing themselves, pushing each other, building these bridges across racial and socioeconomic lines. And I think that's one point of success for STEM to Stern. I think from an individual standpoint, we see success in retention, and then success in a transition up to competitive high school rowing. STEM to Stern really focuses on middle school, and it's a foundation. It builds an identity around the sport. It builds kind of core relationships between kids and coaches. And success is when that foundation really turns into success on the high school level competitively. So, and we found that kids that do STEM to Stern can be really successful on competitive high school teams. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, thank you for that. I will say success for your program is when I see kids that started off in STEM to Stern in our U23 in our national team.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're a few years out from that, but that will definitely be that's a huge mark of success. And I think we're really you know, the team that we have, and really all the clubs around the country that are running this program and doing this work. These are the people that are really planting the seeds that hopefully just continue to grow and develop. And you know, U23, Olympics, all that. We're gunning for it.
Cool, thank you, Mr. World Changer, Arshay Cooper. So same question. You know, you're here because you're a change maker as well. What are the changes that you have been looking to make? And actually, what challenge are you looking to solve in rowing to make it more inclusive? And how does A Most Beautiful Thing Fund actually make that happen?
Thanks, Richard. And happy to be on with Will and Jeff as well. You know, there's a famous quote that says, you know, be the change that you needed when you were younger. And I think that you know, when we were rowing, we had really great coaches and nice coaches, and you know, and we wanted to compete. And for me, especially after the film, we wanted to start this fund and kind of focus not on much on diversity and inclusion, because that has been happening. We've been recruiting thousands of kids a year, right? I think the issue in the sport has been retention when it comes to those young people, and the equity issue. Just like this country, there's many teams that have less and that expect to perform in the same manner as everyone else. You know, you go out there and visit a team, they have very old boats, the oldest boats in the city, the most novice coaches, less days to practice, not many ergs, can't really get great ACT prep, and can't go to any regattas out of town, right? But the talent is there, right? You know, everything that this gifting that you need in a sport is there. And so my mission is to go and solve the equity issue, right? And build a team around going there and giving them all the tools that they need to build this bridge that they want in their lives through this sport. And so, you know, I think Craig White said it best. He said a lot of these kids show up every day, but how do we honor their commitment? And so what we do is we identify existing programs that have been around for a while and with a low budget and that have kids of color, and we show up, we help them recruit, we give them money towards out-of-town regattas, towards the best ACT prep or testing prep in the city. We give them money towards college recruitment, college visits, And we'll also provide them with a coach mentor, a speed coach mentor, and also give them money towards swimming, transportation, and all those things. And I will go and build partnerships and relationships in their city and just give them, again, all the tools they need to thrive and compete with the other kids in the city and get them recruited to college and onto the national team and beyond. And so we partner with a lot of college coaches to get these kids recruited. We help them to understand what they need and help with 2K testing. We give them new shells, we give them new ergs, and we work with them throughout the year. And so that's kind of the mission for us is not only recruit kids and say, hey, nice, you have a body of water to row on, but really solve the equity issue and make sure that they can compete and be who they are in the sport of rowing.
Yeah, thank you for that, Arshay. I want to remind our attendees, if you have a question, don't put it in the chat room because it'll get lost, but put it in the question and answer section so that we can address it. So I'm going to address this first question. I know the answer, but I'll let the panelists answer it. The question on the floor is, and then anyone can step forward and just answer it. How can we actually recruit more inclusive coaches?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I think that, there's many reasons. There's a lot of actually athletes of color on the collegiate level, right? I think it's, looking at, I do it all the time, look at these rosters and see who's there. And I reach out and I build a relationship with them and I ask them what they need or how I can support them, right? And ask them what they love to continue a career in the sport. And number two, I think that, there are many parents and siblings of those young people, older siblings to those young people who we are recruiting. And there's many strength and conditioning coaches who are very athletic, know the community and know how to coach. They just don't have the rowing experience. I would pay them to go onto the master's team and teach them and ask them, can they be coaches, right? They know coaching, they just need to learn the rowing part, right? So I think, there's a couple ways that I think we can do that.
Great, thanks for answering that. Will or Jack, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I think additionally to Arshay's point is, the experiences that those athletes are having at their respective boathouses, and do they want to stay in the rowing community? And I think for the rowing community to understand the value of having these coaches stay in rowing, I think is really important. And I think those relationships that are developed between those rowers and their fellow teammates, their coaches, I think impacts that. And then I think, as a kind of biased, we're really focusing on the kids too. And I think developing many kids of color from this young age, we hope that the pipeline is not only to, U23 world champions and Olympics, but to many more coaches of color in this sport.
Okay. Jeff, you want to address that or we can move on?
Yes, no, quickly. I mean, I have a lot of experience having to recruit coaches because we're in we look a lot different than maybe other parts of the sport. And I just tell the coaches that if you want to have, an outsized impact for the amount of time you spend, start coaching a rower with a disability. You'll be highly appreciated. But more importantly, I tell the coaches that it's not much different than what you're doing already. You just need a couple weeks to figure out sort of the disability part and how that looks and works. I've had to recruit coaches for the U.S. team early on when we first started going to World Championships. They had zero experience in para rowing, but they were able to work through it very quickly. So it's really, I find it's the limiter or the concern is that I don't know anything about working with somebody with a disability, but there really isn't a lot in order to get started. It just really is like any other group where you have something that, you got to sort of functionally work through it. That's all it is. It's just what's called a functional approach. How does somebody move? What are they doing? And how do you work around it or how do you work with it? And that's really how I present it to the coaches, and they can sort of get their heads around that. And then they tend to stay with us because they see the impact that they can have on our community.
Thank you for that. And my response to that is your rowing program have to go out and create the coaches. They're not sitting waiting. And we, as an institution, need to pay all coaches more.
For sure.
We have to professionalize the sport in that sense, the coaching. And so the title of this panel is A Shared Mission, a Unique Approach. And it's about your 3 programs and your approach to making rowing programs more inclusive. I want to start with Arshay with this one because he started alluding to it. And so real change in our sport will require collaboration and unity. My favorite saying that I did not create is, if I'm the smartest one in the room, I'm in the wrong room. And so collaboration is key for any growth, no matter what you're doing. And so in our sport, it will require collaboration and unity. How does your organization, Arshay, work with other organizations, maybe some on this panel and community-based groups?
Yeah, I think, again, the biggest lesson we all learn in rowing is that we can't do the work of 8. We need 8 to do the work, and we'll get there much faster. And, the first thing we do when we choose to work with a program is we ask them to connect with organizations that have really deep community roots and learn what they do and how they do it, and ask, can you complement their vision through the sport of rowing, right? I think sometimes we go into communities and we say, oh, these are our kids, and, we go to the community and we take them out, you know what I mean? But how can we partner with the community to make sure that we give the kids all the tools that they need? So if I would go and start a program, the first thing I would ask is, who's doing swimming really well for a community like this? Or who's doing academic support or tutoring really well? Or what organization is working with kids that experience a lot of trauma? Because there's some things that's just beyond our abilities. And what program has really good college access? And I think that we would do what we do well, but we will connect and collaborate with those other organizations to give the kids, again, the best that they need to be successful. And so I think that is some of the things that ways that I feel like collaboration works with other organizations. But again, to collaborate with organizations that maybe they parents know about to help build that trust and move everyone forward in the right direction.
Right. So what you're saying is we don't have to own it all, but we should share it all. That's the way to go. Jeff, you want to answer that one?
Sure. I'm in Philadelphia, so there's a large rowing community here, and I'm able to tap into that for a lot of things, but not everything. So I have to partner with other organizations that like rehab centers and things like that, where we can, that's the sort of the conduit for our athletes. And during COVID, we've all had to be very creative in continuing to execute our mission. I had a high performance athlete. We weren't able to row for a number of reasons, but I partnered with one of the clubs on Boathouse Row, and we were able to get that athlete water time, which was very important to them. And it's kind of those kind of things where you're just looking for the seams. You're looking for any opportunity. I will talk to anybody, anywhere about what we're trying to do. And I think for people who are thinking about getting involved in this aspect of the sport, that's probably the most important thing. You got to constantly pitch what you're doing. You don't know who you're going to talk to. You don't know what they have, how they can help you, but just keep presenting yourself. And I think all of us started, we didn't have a way. I had no way forward. I came to this from another sport. I didn't know anything about disability. I saw something that was very interesting to me, and I guess I'm the kind of person who just, kept walking, kept doing it. And I think that's, that helps you when you're trying to talk to people. People think you're genuine. Think your mission is, to help the community. So it's just constantly, at least I'm constantly in the community, with my antennas out. Like, can this person help me? Can we impact them? Partnerships are the lifeblood of what we do, because the resources are scarce. and you have to be really clever and to keep your program going.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Will, you are the king of networking and collaborating. Can you just address this for a moment? So what has been your biggest challenge to collaborate?
That's a great question. I think the biggest challenge to collaboration that we've experienced is people who don't believe that it's possible. People who don't believe that the resources are out there. People who don't believe that they can build relationships. People who kind of a lack of belief in that they can be involved in changing the way that rowing is. And then the second thing is a challenge of collaboration is a lack of passion to see change. People who are kind of okay with the status quo. That's been those two things I think have been the biggest challenges for us to work through. It's really hard to collaborate with somebody who either doesn't believe or just doesn't really care like they need to, because this work is really challenging. It's really hard. There are a ton of dynamics at play. There's a lot of logistics at play. There's a lot that goes into this, and I think you have to believe and you have to know why you're doing the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks.
Yeah, I would just add something that Will said, that the status quo is not okay. I think that's really important, and it's a motivator for, I think, the three of us here, that we weren't willing to accept the status quo and wanted to affect change. In my case, I didn't exactly know how that was going to happen, but it did happen. And I think that's something that people who want to get involved in this need to understand. The playbook isn't firm. You have to want to have the will to do this. And people who don't have the will to do it, don't interact with them. They're just going to slow you down. You have to find your allies when you do this, and whether it's in your boathouse or in your community, you really need to pick the right people to move yourself forward.
I think that's important, what you just said there, and that's if you want to change the sport, then you have to change the way you approach the sport. That's how we begin to grow and give opportunities to others. So we have about 4 minutes left. There are 3 questions in the Q&A room. One question U.S. Rowing can answer when it comes to mentor clubs. Panelists, anytime you see a question in Q&A and you feel like just addressing it live, meaning you just go ahead and answer that question, that's great. But I really would like to address the one question about sexuality and so how are you building in programming that expands the discussion to include gender, sexuality, the pervasiveness of female coaches leaving the sport? And if you're not, be honest and say you're not, and we'll say that's something we all need to work on.
I would say that it is something that we are working on. For whatever reason, the amount of women who participate in our program as coaches or volunteers is high. I can't tell you why that is, but that's just our demographic. But as far as the sexuality, I have to be honest, I don't think we have really focused on that. It's not something that's been discussed, but it just has not been a major focus of what we're doing right now, which is frankly trying to get through.
Yep. So thank you for that honesty, being authentic. Will or Arshay, and then we're going to start closing.
Yeah, out. Just briefly, I think for our program specifically, we're really focused on kids. So whether those are boys or girls, whoever, we really, what we try to do is we try to make that experience, no matter who you are, who you identify as, we want to make a very inclusive environment, a really fun and friendly and engaging environment. That doesn't really touch on the pervasiveness of female coaches leaving the sport. But I think what we want to do is we want to give kids a really firm foundation kind of at the beginning of their careers as rowers.
Again, professionalize coaching, pay them. Go ahead, RCA.
Yeah, I would say most of the programs we work with are led by women, those organizations. And, you know, I think they all do a great job with that. And for us, although we're giving grants and showing up, we are creating every opportunity to learn and you know, and empowering those organizations to do the same, especially with the women that and the guys that are on our committee.
Thank you for that. And so a round table really quickly, what are you learning? Ready, set, go.
I was at this sport. It's a lot of work in this sport. So I've learned to be, and I hope everyone can, just to be a better angel of myself to myself. That way we can be a better angel to others. Work-life balance.
Yes, we have to lead with grace.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think I'm really excited about what I continue to learn. I think that there are so many passionate people around the country who are not okay with the status quo, and it is really exciting to uncover people from all over the country who are really committed to doing this work. And that's been something I've been extremely encouraged by.
You know, I've learned to just give people space to try. You know, to at this stage of my career, you know, not at the end, but I can see it. And new people need to step into these roles, and you have to give, you know, you can't just let them make mistakes. You know, just let them try and let them learn, and they'll embrace, you know, what you're trying to achieve. So I take maybe step back a little bit and let somebody, you know, take some responsibility and hopefully take the leadership, you know, forward.
Beautiful. So Jeff McGinnis, Will Bott, Arshay Cooper, I've learned way too much right now. My head's about to explode. Thank you all for your insight, your wisdom. Continue doing what you're doing on behalf of this sport. And maybe one day you all will have a boathouse with your name in front of it. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks, guys.
Thank you, Richard.
Nice to chat with you all.
Nice to see you all. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
We'll be bringing in the next group of panelists just like that. And so the second panel, panel 2, is the coach and athlete perspective. How to retain rowers through genuine relationships, focusing on the person first and walking the walk. And my 3 panelists that for this one is Ricardo Pantilone. And Ricardo, forgive me, but you will help me pronounce your last name. Jen Fitzroy and Craig White. And I'm just trying to find my panelists. Can we get their cameras on?
Yes, I will do that.
Seems to be important.
It does. Yes, we want to see them. Yes.
Is Ricardo here? Let's see. Yes. And so Ricardo is a former rower at Row, New York and Columbia University. Jen Fitzroy is a rower and coach at CRI. And Craig White, former rower at William & Mary and coach at Brick City Rowing and St. Benedict's. Thank you all for agreeing to be here today. I would like to just start the questions right away because we have short time. With our limited time, first off, I'm going to start with just question for all of you to reflect on. How did you actually get into rowing, and why did you stay? Because we hear about this retention issue in the sport of rowing, especially if you're a person of color or a woman or you identify differently. Why did you stay in the sport, and how did you get involved? And was there one person that was a change maker just like you that helped you stay in the sport? And Craig, I'm gonna just throw that at you first.
I fell in love with the sport. I would say that my team and the coaches that I had at William and Mary, they were just good people. They were really good people down in Williamsburg. And beyond that, they made it easy for me to stay. There wasn't all the things that we know typically turn people away from the sport. Transportation, being dismissed or disenfranchised in some way, access, the financial piece. If it was a social problem, it either didn't exist at all. And if it was a financial or logistical problem, the team itself had, things in place to make those things not issues anymore. So I love the community. I love the people. I love my coaches that I had. So I just had a really, really positive experience when I was first introduced to the sport in college.
Yep, that's as you said, the historically underrepresented in our sport, that's not always a welcome match. So I'm glad to hear this positive reason why you stayed in the sport and that you love the sport. It doesn't sound like you had one person in particular as a change maker. It sounds like you had an entire team of change makers. Yep, cool. Jen Fitzroy, nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. Take your mic off and mute because the world wants to hear your voice.
There we go.
And so you have the same question. How did you get into rowing? Why the heck did you stay? And was there someone that was a change maker to you?
So I am a para rower. I'm a full-time wheelchair user because I was born with spina bifida. I row with a fixed seat. And so I found the program at Community Rowing that had the equipment that I needed and the coaching expertise so that I could get out on the water. And I just really loved the indoor rowing. At first, I found that, I was powerful and strong and I really enjoyed the competition. Getting out on the water for the first time was challenging for me. I really struggled with my balance and my coordination. And I left the sport, for a few years, and then I came back. There was just something special about it, and I wanted to continue. And this time I didn't give up on myself. I listened to my coaches, and I just had patience, and they had patience, and I believed that it would happen, and I eventually was able to get the hang of it and feel like I was a rower and to really enjoy the feeling of being out on the river. And so those people are definitely my change makers.
I love it, but I want to go back to a statement you made. What? You loved indoor rowing? Who did that?
I did.
Yes. And so you make a great point that we sometimes think to create diverse and inclusive rowing programs that we have to get them on the water and we have to get them to regattas and we have to have them racy. But actually, an easy entry point is getting on the erg and helping build the confidence and so I appreciate you actually saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it is, especially important for para rowers, especially for the fixed seat rowers. I think that, it's a little bit harder to get to get that wetter time. And so to get that set up just right on the erg with the straps and then the seat, it is it's a good entry point. And that's what, like motivated me to get out on the weather. I wanted to get out. I wanted to get outside.
Yeah, thanks for that. So rowing isn't always just at water. Sometimes just at ergs. Appreciate that. Ricardo, how are you? Haven't seen you in a while.
Hey, Richard, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. And so same question for you. How did you get into rowing? Why did you stay? Was there someone that was a change maker for you or to you?
Yeah. So I started rowing in the 8th grade at Running Arc. They went to recruit at my sister's high school, who's a year older, and she gave me the flyer after school. And the reason I joined was because I thought it would be a good idea to stay in shape leading up to the baseball season that spring, which is my main sport. And then, so when it came time to make that decision, so like, am I going to go back to baseball? I chose to stay with rowing for 2 reasons. The first one, and I think this is the person that sort of convinced me to stay, it was my coach, Brittany, in the 8th grade. Shout out to Brittany, who sort of broke down the statistics for me of the probability of becoming like a professional rower or, going competing at an international level versus becoming like a professional baseball player or basketball player or mainstream sport. In my entire life, I've had an obsession with like elite athletics and like, that life of a pro athlete. So I was sold on that. But then the other thing was sort of the group of guys that I started rowing with. I was fortunate to start, like the group that I started to row with were the same people that I saw for the next 5 years at Running Arc. And that was really special. I think that, I don't know, maybe it was just luck. We were a group that was just clicked and we're very committed to each other from the get-go. But it was also a very fun and inclusive environment that sort of just encouraged people to keep coming back. So, yeah.
Great. So I'm gonna back up just a tick here. You mean someone just put a flyer in your hand and you said, yes.
Yeah.
That's how easy it is to get people to row. Invite them to row. Meet them where they are, right? Don't try to get them to come to the boathouse or to the docks. Meet them where they are. Thanks for that. Was there any particular, you said Brittany was your main change maker.
Yeah, Brittany, Aleo. I can't remember how to pronounce her last name, but
that's fine. We're going to give her a shout out. And this is being recorded. Way to go, Brittany. So one more question for you, Ricardo. So you wrote for Columbia and you stayed with that program for 4 years?
Correct. Yeah. So I walked on as a freshman. I got soft support out of high school, and a very competitive program, and it was a big step, a big jump to that environment, but also very fun and exciting. And I think it was exactly what I was looking for, to find that high level of sport. I think it's prepared me for things that I'm dealing with in life now in my professional career. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you all for answering that question. It's pretty fascinating. Each of your entry points and your experience are completely different. And that's what inclusivity is, not being the same. And so I appreciate that. Jen Fitzroy, I want to start with you with this question. If you had that magic wand, and I'm giving it to you right now, and you could change rowing, what would that be like?
Well, I'm a para rower of color, and so when I go to regattas, I feel pretty different from everyone else. And so if I could wave that magic wand, I would have more color, and I would also have all of the para lanes filled up. I think that, like, especially for, like fixed seat athletes, a lot of times we're, like racing without competition. I want more athletes to have access to the coaching and the training that they need in order to participate in the sport and to be able to go to trials. I think that there is a lot of talent and there's a lot of strength out there. And so I want more para athletes to have that opportunity to compete.
Yeah, I like that. So going from black and white to Technicolor with your magic wand and really changing the face of rowing. Appreciate that. Craig, can you answer the same question?
Oh, how many wishes do I have with the wand?
I'll give you 3.
I mean, I think a lot of it, you know, I've matured. I hear Jen. You know, I don't know how it happened at William and Mary, but there were at least 4 or 5 of us on the team, like kids of color, which isn't a lot, but still, I didn't feel alone. And I think that's definitely a piece. I think now that I've matured more and seen more and seen the backhand side of it, like as a coach and an administrator, you know, I think a lot of the problems are interrelated. You know, I think access is huge, which was talked about earlier. And it's not just, you know, access to a team, it's access to a training space. You know, there are a lot of teams, regardless of whether they have $1 million budget or a $10,000 budget, that don't have, you know, access to water or have to struggle because of limitations with respect to equipment and all that other things. So our sport is just really unique. And it's a sport that, you know, if you have all the indoor equipment you need and all the boats you need and all the oars you need and competent coaches who, you know, who know the sport and are able to teach you, you know, the basics at a really young age, it makes life easier. And when you don't have those things, you know, it makes life harder. But I'm grateful that the one thing that I have seen that's made, you know, all the things that we're talking about more effective is community, you know, and like people being supportive of one another, whether that's, you know, coaches with parents or kids with parents and coaches and mentors and just random people throughout the country, you know, seeing what's happening and wanting to be supportive. I guess that network of support is powerful. And I think that if we, which was alluded to earlier, we spent more time, you know, supporting each other, especially with the programs that are trying to do the things to increase participation in para, increase participation for kids of color, you know, increase access for young women or women period in the upper echelons of the sport, it would be different. So I think that's where it is for me.
That's a really big wand. Appreciate that. Ricardo, same question. If you had that magic wand and could change rowing, what would that look like for you?
Rowing would be cool. I think, you know, I think we all think rowing is cool, right? And that's why we're here. And that's why we're fighting for this. But I would want rowing to be mainstream cool. You know, I think that there's a model that's already in place being used in professional sport. We see it in basketball, football, and soccer, where, you know, that model sort of gives people hope, right? Like you can have somebody who comes from nothing see a LeBron James, for example, and hope that or dream that they could be that person in the future. And I think with rowing, we sort of need to get closer to that. You know, I think it's already being done, not in rowing. Oh, it's being done in rowing through this, but it's also being done in cycling. You know, if anybody's interested, you can look up Justin Williams and the Williams brothers and Legion of Los Angeles and what they're doing with the sport of cycling in the US and how they're diversifying it. You know, they're starting by, you know, they're diversifying the sport through the podiums. They're winning everything. And they're being flashy with it. They're creating that culture that's already used in other sports. And I think that's really important because that's going to attract a lot of different people. And it'll get them to stick around. And I think it'll also create a lot of opportunities down the line. So yeah, that would be my change.
Yeah, so you're saying, Ricardo, let's make rowing like a pair of Air Jordans.
Right. And we see like Rowing Blazers is doing that, for example. They're doing all these cool collaboration and taken to streetwear, and that's really cool. It's also really expensive, but it is high-end fashion. But like, that's a very good example of what can be done. And it's breaking down those like old school preppy, what's the word? Just that old school preppy culture that has dictated the sport for so long. And it's doing something completely different. And I think that could be done. I think that we can put last names on the back of unis. Like, I think that could be really cool, and it gives you pride. So yeah.
All right, so you can be the marketing and communications person for my new brand for rowing.
I'm down. We can do it.
All right, cool. Okay, so I'm going to start with Craig again on this one, and taking for our attendees and our listeners right now. Can you pull on your personal experience to share one idea how to even get closer to the point that you made with your magic wand? So an idea that personally that you lived through that can help the listeners better understand how we can get to that magic space that we're looking for.
I mean, I can talk about my team.
Yeah.
So for years, we're in year 11 now with the high school program that I started. And at the beginning, it was really difficult, getting our kids to understand that they could use their potential, their academic potential, their athletic potential, and turn it into, opportunities for themselves later in life, right? Like, I can use my 3.8 and my ability to pull this on the erg to open a door for myself down the road. Very similar to what Ricardo was alluding to. We had like 9 kids in one erg. And I think the limitations and things like all the things that we've been talking about already, we've been talking about equipment, we've been talking about, access to the water. It was hard for kids to be able to see it, because it wasn't tangible, it wasn't physical, it wasn't real. It's just like, well, how is all this going to happen? We only have one erg. It's literally every year we get more for the kids. We have more ergs, more better boats, better equipment. Every time that happens, the amount of investment that the kids put into themselves and are able to put into themselves increases. So I think there's a direct proportional relationship between, facilitating access through, equipment, resources, water access, and then what you're going to see on the other end in terms of participation from the groups that are underrepresented in the sport. So I think, if you're using what we've been through from over the last decade, I think we could definitely replicate that everywhere else if we're making sure that those resources, those ergs, those boats, those financial resources go into the places where all the kids need is just, those types of things, which is what, Robot and Arshe and lots of people are working to do.
Yeah, I thank you for that. Craig, I think when you say that, we have come really far in this sport, but it's still a very inequitable sport. And that's society, right? We're just matching society, but I would like to not match society. I'd like for us to exceed society and become a more equitable sport. So thanks for sharing that. Jen, same question. You just waved your magic wand. You're changing things through your personal experience. Could you give some tips or lessons, or tips on how you can make that happen through your personal experience?
So rowing has always been it started out as a challenge, and I'm constantly, challenged every day, but I'm really proud of the progress that I've made in the sport. I've become more confident and better with communication and more willing to take risks. And 2 months ago, I came on to CRI as the manager of the para and military programs. So I don't coach, but I manage the para programs there. So I'm drawing on my experience in the Open Para program to recruit athletes and to make them feel special and wanted and appreciated and included, no matter what level they might want to be, whether it's recreational or whether it's elite. And I'm also I'm excited that there are more para rowers who are in these leadership positions and who want to be coaches. And I think that is going to be a major answer by us talking about the sport ourselves and promoting it and working in the field and really walking that walk to do ourselves. So I'm excited about the possibilities for the program that I'm working for, and I am just excited to see para rowing, especially fixed seat rowing, grow through that disability leadership.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. I want to congratulate you on your new role. I am sure it's a very challenging role. I've always admired the adaptive and para program at CRI, and I'm glad to see that the program is going to continue to be in great hands. So thanks for that. Ricardo, your magic, you're going to take your little unicorn dust and use your personal experience to really change the sport. How would you do that?
Yeah, no, I think that, what I was referencing before sort of ties more into changing culture and taking ownership of the culture. And from my personal experiences, I've realized that sometimes you just have to be bold and you have to be comfortable, or you have to put yourself out there and be comfortable with being vulnerable in front of others. I think that there have been moments in my career at New York or at Columbia where I was certainly the only person that felt a certain way. And sometimes there are things that need to be said, and nobody else is going to say them. And so you have to take ownership for that. Not you, I mean, we have to take ownership for that, right? I think that probably one of the biggest things that I've done to try and change the culture of rowing was sort of last year pulling just from the resources of the Collegiate Lightweight Rowing League and working with other captains across the league to change our teams and change the cultures of our team to be more inclusive of people like me, people like us. I think that it's definitely very hard, just standing in front of a group of people that may very well not understand where you're coming from or might just shut down what you're saying. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be easy, right? And diamonds are made under pressure. And I think that, that's why conversations like these are so important, because we have so many different experiences and different ways of how people have taken ownership to force that change.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that in this space. What comes to mind with what Jen said earlier is I need to see representation before I want to be representative of whatever that sport. And so with Jen taking up that space now to manage the program, that's going to make that program even more fruitful. That's really cool. And what you're saying, Ricardo, is the culture. The culture. It's hard. People can't accept change because they think they're going to lose something. And I think our approach to growing this sport and providing more access is to show people what they're going to gain: faster boats, more podium wins, and grow the sport in general. And so we have less than 3 minutes left. And I just love this question, and I've asked the other panel group, what is your lesson learned? What is your aha moment in this world of rowing that you can share to our attendees and our listeners? Jen, I'm gonna start with you. I know you're probably writing your answer down, and I got you.
I think to be genuine and to be vulnerable, to be myself. I think that is, like what rowing has taught me. And so I hope that, like rowing can be like representation of all types of people.
Yeah. I've heard that authenticity from Ricardo, and just being yourself and being raw and just putting yourself out there. That's how we're going to change this sport. Thank you for that. Craig?
Oh, fight like hell. If this stuff is important to you, and Ricardo alludes to it, like no one's going to open the door. There are definitely people who care, but if people don't, just forward,
Right.
Just move forward, because, the only way this stuff stops happening is when we stop trying, so just keep moving forward. If expanding the sport is your thing, just keep pushing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, let's not put our energy into the people who don't care, and keep moving forward. Ricardo, bring it home.
Yeah, I think that my lesson will tie in nicely with Craig's and what you just said, Richard, is that, as you know, there are people that don't care, there are people that do care. And I think we tend to forget that. And, like sometimes it may not feel like that, but people show up to practice for a reason. People choose to, at the end of the day, it's a choice, right? That was one of our biggest things at Columbia, is that it's a choice. People choose to stay involved. People choose to be a part of this. And therefore you can you can assume a lot of the times that people care. And, there are a lot of resources on a team, not only, like rowing resources, but just people with different experiences, exposure to different things. And, you need to connect with those people that care and push for this, or push for whatever it is that you stand for, because at the end of the day, you got to stand for something, right? So yeah, I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned. I guess that's just a long version of networking, right? But
yeah, so thank you, Jen. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Ricardo. The coach and athlete perspective and how to retain rowers was pretty cool. Once again, I've learned something. I can't wait to steal most of what all of you have said and help programs throughout the country grow. Thank you for your stories, and they're important stories, and keep sharing them. Thanks for being here. See y'all. We have Liz Winter coming on board, Carl Snoneker, and I also have Francine Chu. Where is Francine? Let me see her face on here. There you are. Francine, there you are. Are you with us? Camera's not working. Give me a high sign, Francine.
I'm guessing Francine signed off and it's going to sign back on. Oh, there she is. There she is. So I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, fantastic. So my next panelist will be behind the scenes, from funders to researchers to trainers. You may not see them, but they're out there making a difference. I would like to introduce to you Francine Chu, former rower at Yale and presently board member of Row New York. You can say, hey. Hey. And we have Liz Winter, who I just met at the head of the Ohio, and I bet she didn't know that I could get her to US rowing as quickly as I did. Former rower at Oxford, and presently rowers at Three Rivers Rowing and on the faculty of University of Pittsburgh. And then my longtime friend, Carl Skoneker, former rower of Bucknell, presently coach at Robert Morris, and just an all-around awesome human being. And so we will just jump right in, and don't forget for the attendees, you can go to the Q&A and ask questions, and we'll get to them when we get to them. And so all of you represent such unique roles within this sport. And before I go on, is Francine with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Right. I think someone on your end has to enable my video. I can't turn it on myself.
Okay.
I have made you a co-host, Francine. It should work now.
It does.
There she is. Yay.
Hi, everyone.
The magic wand. It worked again. Welcome. And so all of you represent such unique roles within this sport. Carol, you as a coach and a researcher, and I love your research. Francine as a board member, and Liz as an educator and researcher. And I love this area that we're not going to talk about at the moment, but you might get a chance to, Carl and Liz, just talking about, just trauma-informed coaching and how important that is as we continue to as we grow this sport. Coaches really need to be trained in trauma-informed coaching. And I'll see if we can weave that into this conversation, because it's fascinating. And if people are just starting a program, or you have coaches and you're trying to think of what's next level for your coach, that may be the area of conversation. But because you all represent so many different areas, what do you see your purpose your purposes in rowing, and how are you making a difference? If Francine, just in case we lose you, I'm gonna go with you first.
Sure. I assume you can hear me well.
We hear you.
Great. So I was a rower for all high school and all college, and it's really an honor and a privilege for me now to be a board member. Part of my role now is frankly representation, to show a lot of the students in Row New York, because Row New York, a big part of the mission is to really diversify the sport of rowing. So showing that there are folks who have rowed and have come through on the other side and have still integrated it into their lives in meaningful ways. Another piece is frankly to represent the perspective of the students we serve within the boardroom, because my mom was a housekeeper and nanny. I was privileged to row because someone said, "You look like a tall, strong girl, come row," right? And so much of the challenges of confronting everything from race to class to whatever else, because much of what we tackle in the programmatic components of Row New York is based on that dynamic, right? I chair the programs committees there, so being able to add my voice and share that perspective in a way that allows it to be heard, I think, is a huge part of the impact that I have now.
Yes, I love what you said. And, one of the things going into creating more diverse and inclusive rowing programs, or any program, it doesn't matter, even if it's a business, is that we have to first start with that we all don't have the same lived experiences. And that's super important, to start from that space. And then something that I heard loud and clear, and I've been hearing it throughout the theme, not throughout the program today, is that you were invited to row. And Rachel Friedman, shout out to you, she put in the chat room that once she got out of her own way of her awkwardness and building that self-confidence to begin to knock on doors, that's how she began to finally, help the sport become more inclusive. So I like that. And so thank you for your perspective. Carl, I'd like to popcorn right to you, and same question from where what do you see as your purpose in rowing? and how are you making a difference?
Well, I'm really privileged to be in a bunch of different areas in rowing and community rowing and nonprofit, but mostly in the collegiate space. So I think what I've come to realize, and again, I'm a first generation college student and I saw the opportunities that rowing gave me in rowing at college. So when I started to really interrogate the systems of higher education or the NCAA or any of these other areas that we see that are really have systemic inequity built into them, then it became a really interesting conversation with my athletes on how we could almost circumnavigate that to provide more opportunity at this level, since novice rowing is a huge part of collegiate rowing and so many people have the opportunity to just walk onto a team once they're already in school. So I really like to focus on the higher education piece, and I used to be a classroom teacher too, so I saw a lot of the same system following my students that would prevent them from getting to where I got to be so easily, and really wanted to interrogate that.
So I want to applaud you. When I was at the head of the Ohio and I looked at the boats from the colleges and I looked at Robert Morris's boats of very strong athletes, and the athletes of color was the most athletes of color at the whole regatta. So I want to applaud you for that, because that's intentional. So you have that's your other purpose. So Liz, welcome Liz. And what did you see your purpose in rowing, and how are you making a difference?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm among wonderful people here and I appreciate it. So my purpose, I sort of come from a lot of different places, but one is the trauma-informed piece and the coaching education. And I was struck by Katie Brennan's question in the chat about how do we have coaches and leaders who can be inclusive and be self-regulated and support resilience and trauma-informed, be trauma-informed themselves if they are still coming from their own places of pain and of, not knowing what they don't know. And someone said earlier today, we do what we know. And I feel my role in the middle of all this is capacity building in coaches to develop those concrete skills in emotional intelligence and self-regulation, and a solid grounding in the understanding of trauma and resilience, so that they have a sense of what they're looking at in athletes of all ages and from wherever they come, and understand that behavior that they may see as not like theirs and therefore challenging is sometimes indicative of very high levels of resilience, and sometimes indicative of very high levels of relational need and challenge and so on. And so for me, it's capacity building, and it's doing it in coaching education and in working with programs to increase their capacity also. And I've had the privilege of working in workforce development for many years, doing some of that work.
Fantastic. And I think it's really important, and especially because this is being recorded, trauma-informed coaching may be a new term. Can you just give us a brief synopsis of what that is?
So trauma-informed coaching recognizes the impact of diverse and sometimes extreme experiences on people, not just in their own lifetimes, sometimes across generations, sometimes because of their membership in particular groups, historical, cultural, extreme experience, and that we're not all on a level playing field, and that if we have had the privilege of being safe enough to develop a strong stress response system so that we come back to baseline quickly, that's great. But not everyone has been able to do that. And so it's about creating safe enough spaces to ask people to take risk. It's about calibrating the risks that we ask people to take and not pushing people to a place they can't take as soon as we would like to. And doing things like not writing them off because, oh wait, they're not athletic, or they're not behaving the way I expect them to behave. And it's about regulating ourselves as coaches before we ask our athletes to self-regulate themselves in ways that we find appropriate, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, thank you for that. What comes to mind for me is, as coaches and as leaders, we always talk about retention once we do include athletes that are different, but do those athletes feel psychologically safe in your boats, in your boathouse, in your, on the bus? And until we create that brave and courageous space, your retention is going to continue to be low. So thank you for that. I want to answer a question. I want to ask a question, and anyone can grab it. This is, how do we create lasting change in our sport if we don't engage with those who may doubt but are still part of your community? And we sort of talked about that in the last panel, but any of you can jump in on that one.
Go ahead, Liz. You want to go?
No, I defer to you, absolutely.
I think about this a lot, and it's been a topic of conversation in a lot of the collegiate rowing coaching meetings we've been having. Is how do we get more buy-in? How do we get people to show up? How do we get people to actually believe that these conversations are important and lead to speed? I think what I keep going back to is, as terrible as it sounds, I mean, even if you're not, no one is fully altruistic, but even if you don't have altruistic intentions, expanding your talent pool is always going to lead to better results. So if you do that in every way, it's going to benefit everyone. So I think really emphasizing that piece is huge. And I'll use novice rowing again, because I know at the college level, novice rowing is bouncing around as something that colleges are thinking about whether or not they actually want to invest in anymore. And I just think about how much slower we're going to be long term if we're eliminating that number of potential athletes who could find this sport later on in life. And it just doesn't seem like a long-term goal that's going to benefit anyone.
Thanks for that. Francine, do you want to weigh in? Liz? Go ahead, Francine.
Actually, I'll defer to Liz. Let me keep thinking.
Okay, and by the way, panelists, feel free to answer questions in the Q&A room on your own if you want. You can just you can respond to them anytime you want, and so that'll be great. Okay, Liz.
So I'm wondering whether the question is, if we don't engage those who doubt, and I'm wondering what who our doubters are. Are they doubting that they should be included, or are they doubting that inclusion is valuable? So I'm not quite sure. And Al, if you want to elaborate on that, but I'm going to talk very briefly about something that has sort of been a surprise to me, though it shouldn't be. I have 20 years of experience as a therapist, so this shouldn't be a surprise. In doing this kind of work with coaches, it was a surprise to me the depth of the pain that people brought from their own athlete experiences and how much they doubted their own voices in wanting things to look a little bit different. And so those voices of coaches who are coming into sometimes very established programs, and sometimes very successful programs where I think it was Chris Chase in an earlier this afternoon said, if you're a successful coach, you have a lot of leeway in how you behave. And I'm paraphrasing, so Chris, forgive me if I'm paraphrasing badly. But you got a lot of freedom to do things good and bad. And so, how do we engage people who are doing things that they find successful? And how do you bring in a high value on resilience and athlete and coach well-being, particularly assistant coaches? And how do you also focus on high performance? And these are not either or. Until we get to both and, we have work to do, and we have to keep talking to people who don't buy that yet. And so those are the people that I want to talk to, and the folks that want to, doubt whether they want to join us. If that conversation's not happening overtly, I don't blame them for doubting.
Thank you, Francine.
So thank you. I like you, Liz, I wasn't quite sure what the question was fully asking, but let me answer in the way that comes to mind for me. A lot of the questions that I have are from folks in other sports, actually, who question whether rowing should be or can be truly diversified, right? Because there are barriers in representation, and therefore it makes it harder if you don't see yourself as a person of color or someone who is differently abled, et cetera, to feel like there's actually space or room there for you. And because so much of the pipeline into rowing comes through independent rowing clubs, private schools, recruiting, et cetera, the question is, why would someone who doesn't see themselves there not go to a different sport, for instance, or no sport at all? And that's where the doubt comes in for me. And here too is where, people are looking for different experiences and different things. I found that for me, rowing was an avenue to access that has been lifelong. And my friends who I rowed with in college, we were bridesmaids in each other's weddings and, invited into homes. And so truly it allowed me to break down barriers in ways that I don't know if I ever would have otherwise, and build really true connections. And so much of the sport and what I learned from it about collaboration and teamwork, perseverance, grit, all of those good things, really the foundational skill set was learned in the boat and on an erg. And for doubters, I feel like it's in many ways incumbent upon the rowing faculty to actually extend and specifically keep those doors open and to target difference, or else it won't happen. Because it's really easy, I think, to just go the well-traveled route, which will cut off many avenues of diversity. So continue to pull those tall, strong-looking people off the line. Try to get people who are different in groups and clusters, so no one ever feels as if they are representing all by themselves. I find that sometimes having a buddy can be incredibly helpful, or whatever other strategies, but have a strategy that is intentional and a goal to diversify. So that's how I would answer.
Thanks for that. Thank you. That was a curveball question, and all three of you handled it very, very well. Again, your different lived experience gave us all a more inclusive response to that. And so the person asked a question, bravo to you for asking the question, and you got a multitude of answers, and I hope you go away and now you know which direction to go. So thank you. So my next question, we have 10 minutes left. No hurry. This isn't a warning to say speed up and talk. Actually, we're doing great here. But this question is a loaded and generalized question, but already now know who you three are, and I'm looking forward to the answer to this. From where you sit, what can leaders of organizations do to make their programs more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? And I want to start with Liz this time.
I think there are both formal and informal pathways to that. And
Okay.
Formal pathways are get people to come in and not just train, because we know there's a quick decay on training, but train and mentor and coach your coaches to respond to people in a way. If you're more trauma informed, you're more inclusive. And so you're more likely to retain people who don't all look the same, don't all behave the same, and have different lived experience. The formal training, mentoring, and coaching is essential. And I heard some discussion about, should we put trauma-informed coaching into level 1 or level 2? Absolutely. Yes, that should be in there, but it shouldn't be a single touch. And the informal part is to keep lifting up the voices of the people who are typically in a chain of command where perhaps they don't feel they have a voice, and then don't punish them for saying it, right? If you ask, if you're going to ask for people's input, then it's you listen, and it's going to change things, and it's not comfortable. And for those of us who are often in or seem to be in a majority role, it's a choice about whether you're going to be uncomfortable or not. And for many people, they do not have that choice. And so be uncomfortable and ask the questions you don't want answers to, or are uncomfortable about hearing answers to.
Yeah, thank you for that. I like it a lot. Go, Francine.
If I could build on that, the notion of listening. This past year, Row New York, we had a group of alumni share feedback about their experience in the program, and it was incredibly helpful. And that feedback allowed us to, incorporate changes into the program, into the programs, and also to include alumni representatives on the program committee so that we could have their voices be represented. So listening is key, and listening to a multitude of voices. I think the listening piece is, step one, because once you gather feedback, what do you then do with it? And how do you then report back to the folks who told it to you, hey, I heard you, and here's how we're acting on it. So the minute I think you ask a question, I would also encourage, leaders of organizations to recognize that you are opening the door to a conversation, and one that you should hope is ongoing. So poll, process, I think report back out and act on what you hear is what my recommendation would be.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Thank you for that. Carol, would you weigh in?
I'll build off of Francine and Liz. I think once you get that feedback too and process it, I think bringing athletes in to help build programming is really important. So I have come to a point where I really enjoy like a distributive leadership model on our team. It's their program. So if we're building it together and we're having intentional spaces made for conversations that are difficult and we're processing together, it's done a lot to really emphasize building relationships and building trust and vulnerability, and we're growing together, which I think immediately translates to the water as well. So the fact that athletes get to have such a huge role in creating their own programming gives that autonomy, and it's a lot more collaborative, and we're all working towards a similar goal. So I think that just kind of incorporates both parts.
Yeah, Carol, again, I was at the beginning of your program many years ago when you were an assistant coach, and have watched the growth of that and the ownership of your athletes, not just the ownership of being intentional and being part of the recruiting process, but also that their empowerment that they were given within your program then spread out throughout the entire campus to all athletics. And that's really, really cool. So kudos to that distributive style of leadership. So my final question, we have 5 minutes, and Liz, you take 2, Francine, you take 2, you only get 1. No, I'm joking, Carol. You can start, Carol, but I want takeaways. What are you learning? What are you learning that the leadership and the attendees and the rowers and coaches that are in this session today can really have that golden nugget and take back to their program?
I'm going to echo what we've heard over and over again. I think the power of community in every way that you define community, not just our rowing community, but in your cities and your waterway as a community. I think leveraging those networks and really investing in relationships and deep, meaningful connection will just benefit everyone in the long run. Also makes you feel really supported, so it's a good feeling.
Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Agreed, absolutely. And as I'm listening to Carol talk about distributed leadership, I'm wondering how many people that strikes fear into their very bones. that, that we sometimes mistake being authoritative for being authoritarian and very top down. And heaven knows for safety purposes, we often do that. And so for me, we have to keep talking to each other to make those things values and not like, oh, that's all very well for them. That would never work for us. It's like we have to keep challenging ourselves, talking to people, finding out what people are doing and listening and knowing that there are many of us who want real change. And we have to find each other because I think sometimes we're very siloed in these little fiefdoms that are programs.
Thank you for that. Effective leaders give away the power. Ineffective leaders keep it to themselves. Francine.
Sure. I have to go back to the prior panel because I was really struck by the fact that, the young woman who's talking about, being a manager for the program that's really working with athletes who are differently abled and that how much courage that takes. Representation matters is a huge piece. Just physicality also matters, moving our bodies in ways that teach all of these lifelong skills, that matters incredibly. And, sport is beautiful as a goal in and of itself, but it's also beautiful in that it teaches us about who we are and sort of strips down barriers and all that good stuff. And for that reason alone, I think, pursuit of all that we're doing here is important. I'd also say the last thing that I've learned from listening to this conversation is find expertise where it exists and leverage that. And it may be a component of your program that can rely on someone else, but because rowing is all about, working together for a shared goal, let's extend the way that we see collaboration beyond just our sport and bring in trauma-informed specialists and bring in people who are, specialists on the particular communities that we're working in, bring in, folks who specialize in college placement and access and all that jazz. So more collaboration was another key takeaway for me here.
Yeah, thank you. I like that you have your own takeaways from the other panelists. Pretty powerful. I appreciate that. And so before we sign off, I want to give a shout out to Brittany Bell from the 2016-17 Carol's team, who's now a coach, and thank you for your kind words. I appreciate you. And so Liz, Carol, Francine, we lifted the curtains and got a look behind the scenes. And I don't want to put that curtain back up. I've learned so much from you today. I'm pretty sure our listeners learned a lot from you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for saying yes, and have a fantastic weekend. Thank you all that viewed this. Be sure to tell others that this is being recorded and this is a must watch. This was a 90-minute panel discussion on steroids. I love it. And thank you for having me as your host. See you all.